okay with it, we're gonna jump in to our last segment. We have a 45-minute panel with Sarah coming back and Davy Rao, who's joining us from the Cooperative Extension to talk about funding as well as implementation. I think it'll be another interesting component that we kept touching on in these questions, and we'll get to dive in a little bit more. So that with that, Sarah, I won't go through your bio again this time. I'll let you just
No,
jump
please
right
don't.
ahead.
Okay, let me share. This one I actually have some slides, so I'll share my screen. All right. So I'm here to talk about funding potentials. Again, there's so much more to this. So this is just kind of a review in being creative in funding approaches and how do we get funding into our landscape level work? How do we get funding down into our small communities who typically don't get a lot of resources? How do we allocate our resources better? Because we have a history of the same places that are good at accessing resources continuing to get those same resources. So let's think about how we can create some conditions for that to change. Oops. Oh, hold on. I don't know what I did there. I'm sorry, guys. I'm having technical difficulty. There we go. Okay, so what I recommend to everyone first, if you're a landowner, if you're a grazer, if you're any of these things, find your local support and develop relationships. So I think Davey's going to talk a little bit more about NRCS, but there are programs through the NRCS. NRCS funding is less accessible. You have a lot, the higher the funding goes, the more paperwork you need to do, the more things that go into it, but it's there and they can support it. The RCPP is a great one that is a wildfire resiliency funding grant, and it will fund grazing. I do have one community grazing cooperative, Bennett Ridge, that has had NRC, our Sonoma County NRCS office go out there and talk about how they all burned in 2017. They've rebuilt, and now they have a grazing cooperative in which they hire a grazer. And NRCS may be able to help fund a per acreage. So maybe support that by $500 per acre for the community to keep that grazing going. You know, even if it's a single application, they're going to do it annually. They're looking into how do we do biannual grazing impact. But if we can have these kind of supports, those are options for people. And so that was the thing I said about supporting community grazing cooperatives through the RCPP. And then there's the EQIP, which I know Byron's done some EQIP work, and for Jonna, who was at the event, Byron really understands water systems and getting water to the livestock. And I think that's a really, really important knowledge to have and a skill that we need to improve, because not only water systems for our livestock, but water systems for our firefighters to get in and access water in zones that are typical zones where you want to stop a fire. Like if it's coming into communities, if it's over a hillside, like how can we be strategic with our water systems for both grazing and firefighting? EQIP will do internal fencing too, I believe, but no perimeter fencing, which is the one thing I'm working on. Is let's improve perimeter fencing resources. So these goats here, these are chasing goats grazing. These are some of Chase's goats out at Toyon Grazing Cooperative. It was a grazing cooperative up in Healdsburg where the community is grazing together, and they all hired Chase. I think it's been 2 or 3 years to graze. And what I find really exciting, you see all the yellow back there, that's all broom. The places that they've grazed for 3 years has almost no Scotch broom left. It's almost all gone. And then the landscapes right next door where they weren't grazed, it's a forest of broom. So the impact is changing that ecosystem. You know, it's really important. So also reach out to your NRCS, reach out to your RCD, get connected to both of them. If you are a landowner, get them both onto your landscape and walk and talk with them. That's what they're there for. They're conservation. There may be other things they can do, but there is wildfire resiliency in there. And grazing is one of the tools that they can help you think about what they have to offer you, and they can be creative with you. These agencies are both there to serve us for conservation goals for landowners. So reach out to both of them. I'm going to talk a little bit next about the land smart grazing, but that's the CAL FIRE wildfire resiliency grants. We're working on getting them to fund grazing. They're getting better at it. I'm going to talk about a little policy that does that. And also, like we talked about, forest maintenance. So in my work, we have up here, we have the NBFIP, or the North Bay Forest Improvement Program, which is a grant for Sonoma, Mendocino, Lake, and Napa counties for forest health for wildfire resiliency. And we also just applied for a forest health grant. So I get to work with the two legs of CAL FIRE. So if any of you have worked with CAL FIRE or written grants for them, each arm of their grants don't interact or talk to each other. Like the forest health grant does not know anything about wildfire resiliency, doesn't even know each other's names, I don't think. So it's such a big organization and there's not cross-pollination. So in speaking with the forest health division, what I gave them and what everybody's giving them a lot of feedback is we need money for maintenance. You need to start giving us money for maintenance. So when somebody asks how you can do this, reach out to your CAL FIRE representative that you work with and continue to give them this feedback in writing and verbally. It's getting passed up. When I spoke to some of the higher levels in CAL FIRE, they are hearing that. And again, these changes are very slow because CAL FIRE is looking to begin changing into funding maintenance, understanding that they're putting out $7 million to treat a forest, which 3 years later, it looks just like it did when they did the first application of treatment. And that's not economically viable. We can't keep dumping money without a maintenance program. So they're hearing it. Keep giving the feedback, keep seeking these things, because that's how we begin to get change. And then Senate Bill 675. This bill was signed into law that supports grant applications for funding utilizing grazing. So this was a push through with CalCan. And if anybody doesn't know CalCan, they're an agency that does a lot of policy work for climate resilient agriculture. And CAF, which is Community Alliance of Family Farmers, was another push on this. But this was a bill that basically says grazing applications can be and should be funded for vegetation management and wildfire resiliency. So this is policy that puts that into place. So grants can't say, we're not funding the grazing because it's not an adequate tool. This push just says they can't use that language anymore. And that's another thing we need to keep pushing. The CAL FIRE people that I work with that are boots on the ground love grazing. The people who are analyzing the grants at the top don't see it as a benefit yet. The trickle up has not happened. So continuing that language and continuing to demonstrate, like the pictures Roxanne showed in the beginning. Was that Hopland? Yeah. I love those pictures. They're so good. But it's the sheep grazing. And I've seen it here in Sonoma County where the fire's up in the trees. It's in the canopy and it hits a graze zone and it just drops down. I don't know that we understand why, but it literally drops it out of the canopy, which is a beautiful thing. So this policy helps us seek funding and it gives us a pushback with the agencies that might not want to fund it. And the more we can do those demonstrations and show this and researchers showing that this works, the more likely we can find this funding. It's really hard for an individual. So when I'm talking about funding with CAL FIRE, it wouldn't be an individual thing. It would be like an RCD or a Fire Safe Council or, those kind of things. So Fire Safe Council of Butte County up in Paradise, which Butte County's burned like almost every year. As we know, the city of Paradise burnt to the ground. Their Fire Safe Council is implementing lots of grazing, and the city of Paradise is I'm helping them to hopefully build out a grazing cooperative for their city. Like, how do we integrate animals into a sustainable system for public and private lands in places that have burned repeatedly, especially? So I'm just trying to keep track of time, so just yell at me if I talk too much.
We have a fair amount of wiggle room with our end, so I'm just letting you cruise because I know this is a really important topic.
So I wanted to highlight the Land Smart Grazing Program, which is a unique and replicable funding program for grazing. And it was created by Goldridge and Sonoma RCDs. In Sonoma County, we have 2 RCDs. Most counties have 1. And in collaboration with myself, Wild Oat Hollow, and the UCC Livestock Range Management Advisor. The vision was, it was after the 2017 fires, Sonoma County, we burned really badly. We got a lot of money from PG&E. So how do we, for vegetation management purposes. So how are we going to do that? The Land Smart Grazing was implemented out of that, which has continued to morph and grow. And that's one of the things I want to point out as well. So I just want to talk about the program. It started out of the fires. It started out as just like what Chase and Emma were talking about, just fuels reduction. Like, so we're grazing just to get fuels down. We're grazing, but we started to have secondary long-term good effects, like the places, if they could graze 2 or 3 years, the Scotch broom went away. How many years with grazing and monitoring are we starting to see the seed bank change into a healthier fire ecosystem, things that won't burn so badly? It is a rebate program, like a lot of these programs. So private landowners would be able to hire any contract grazer they want to hire. And they'd pay for it, then they'd send the invoice to the RCD, and the RCD would rebate them at a certain percentage. Usually it's between like 60 and 80%. That's the same with the North Bay Forest Improvement Program. If anybody's interested in that program, if you have forests at work. Right now, we don't have grazing in that program, and I'm going to change that eventually. So you have a list of contract grazers, you would hire your grazer, and then you would get reimbursed. And the priorities were, because the initial funding was for vegetation management for Sonoma County, was high risk fire places, densely populated and underserved communities that maybe not have the resource to pay a contract grazer. And it was initially created to support our contract grazers. Like, let's help get them in places, let's help fund their work, and let's help the communities that can't afford that payment to pay for it. So, and then it kind of morphed over time, which I think is the next slide. But it is currently a Sonoma County program. We are having meetings with Lake County and hopefully Napa County to make it regional, just like the NBFIP. Like, as we know, ecosystems, landscapes do not stop at property lines. They don't stop at counties. In 2017, Napa and Sonoma, we were burning all over the place. So we need to go across these ecosystems, and these programs are meant to do that, which is why it's called Land Smart and not just like Goldridge RCD program. So we've had 5 phases so far. We're looking for applications for phase 6. So phase 1, 2, and 3 were the Sonoma County Ag and Open Space Vegetation Management Grant through the funds we got from PG&E, through the county's funds we got from PG&E. Phase 4, we were able to be far more creative and fun. I think in phase 2 or 3, I can't remember, sorry. We started to do mini grants. So contract grazers can apply for a mini grant up to $2,500 to $3,000. So if they need new tires on their truck, if they need to buy more fencing, if they need anything, trailer stuff, whatever, they can get that mini grant where they just get the money and they just have to show they paid for it. They get reimbursed for those costs. And then in phase 3, I said, why don't we start funding these community grazing cooperatives? And that was the next stage where we started our grazing cooperatives. If they needed some infrastructure support, water systems, a shelter at somebody's house, more fencing, maybe a trailer to move between if they couldn't move animals on the hoof. And so we were able to fund them. Each got $3,500, and it changed those communities' life, and they were able to add on neighbors and make their programs so much better. So we continue to offer these mini grants to community grazing cooperatives and contract grazers to support all of the pieces, and to make, with smaller amounts, make big changes, dramatic changes on people's life. So phase 4, we got our funding from California State Coastal Conservancy. And this, they wanted us to do public lands and private abutting lands, which we wrapped into phase 4, as you can see here. And what was really exciting about this is we were able to start building more collaborative things. I should say back in phase 3 was when we have a ranking system for applicants. We want to rank places that have high fire risk zones, but then secondary, you're much higher ranked if you're grazing with your community. If 2 to 3 people apply together, you're much more likely to get funded, because we want it to go across property lines, this kind of regenerative grazing and targeted grazing for vegetation management. So phase 4, we were able to do public lands and create large fire fuel breaks across, like Sonoma Mountain. We have Sonoma Mountain Regional Park. We have Osborne Preserve, that is SSU, where now this was the first funder where we were able to provide infrastructure. So through infrastructure and fencing on our mountain, we now have cattle that will in perpetuity be able to graze that place. And it's a fire break for fires to go into Runner Park. And so this was our phase where we begin to do infrastructure support and start to see long-term changes, both ecological and vegetation management. So we're going to be chasing more funders like this that want to see strategic planning and long-term benefits without constant economic support into those projects, which is really our goal. So priorities have changed over time. One of the things I talked about was returning it back to a healthy fire ecosystem. So we're encouraging these communities to not just hire Chase or Pagelin or Two Rock or one of our grazers for 1 year, but how about you sign a 3-year contract with a contract grazer? Because we see in 3 years a true change start to happen on that landscape. And most of the contract grazers will give you a little discount for that because then they have that calendar mapped out for 3 years. Like Chase and Emma, they're booking way out. What if every year they had a plan and they didn't have to worry about, do I have to sell stock because I don't have enough places for the stock? Do I have to buy a bunch of stock that doesn't know how to graze? Let's have a plan and let's have quality animals going out and doing the work and support our grazers so they don't have to have, how's this year going to go feeling. Also, we're training the funders. We're getting more people like Coastal Conservancy to fund infrastructure. And we're getting public land managers to put in the infrastructure and create long-term contracts with livestock producers next door. So that livestock producer gets that another 100 to 500 acres in perpetuity for grazing so they can plan for their stock and provide fire breaks. Also, building trust is a big part of it. And that was the question about down in Yolo County coming down. The first meeting is often building trust. Like, we're safe. We're here to support you. This is a long-term vision. It's a listening session. Build trust with the private landowners. Build trust. Let them start to feel that the agencies are on their side and start thinking long-term, listening to what their big concerns are and starting to train our funders to listening to the boots on the ground. This is a place, they call themselves, they're Herding Hope Grazing Cooperative, and every single home burnt in 2017. They barely made it out. So this little picture was a great picture for it. The long-term opportunities of this program is to continue to find new funding access and funnel it into our communities that need it the most, continue to support our contract grazers and they're economic viable to stay in our county, which is a very expensive place to live. Continuing to evolve by listening to the feedback of our grazing cooperatives, our people hiring contract grazers, our urban land managers, like City of Petaluma is building out a grazing cooperative now. City of Cloverdale is building one out. City of Santa Rosa has just allocated money to start their grazing cooperatives. Like, how do we start helping them with their visions and building out strategic long-term economic viable programs, implementing grazing as a tool that is replicable and doable based upon your place, setting that up. So we want to be flexible. We want to evolve. We want to funnel money into the people that need it the most. And we want to support all the different pieces that make this work. And that's it. So that's me with, if anybody wants to pet or hug a sheep, all my sheep are like way too friendly and you can hug them. And that's it. And any question, I think we go to Davey before we have questions, right?
Yeah, we'll jump over to Davey and then we'll be able to field the questions for both of you after Davey goes. But speaking of Davey, she's the new Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor for Sonoma and Marin counties. And prior to coming to the North Bay, she was the Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor in San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties, where her program focused on targeted grazing, prescribed burning, and climate change mitigation on working rangelands. She's beginning to meet the people in Sonoma and Marin counties, and she'll be conducting a needs assessment to inform the development of her research and education program. I've also worked with Davey for a long time, and we've kind of dovetailed each other's careers, and I followed her over there in Point Reyes, and I'm so appreciative of her knowledge and experience, and excited to hear more about your upcoming work and your past work. So thanks, Davey.
Thanks, Roxanne. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this presentation, this workshop. It's been really wonderful to hear all of the amazing things that are going on in Sonoma and Marin counties. Like Roxanne said, I'm the new Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor. I'm covering Sonoma and Marin counties. For those of you who know Stephanie Larson, she is now retired, and I am the person filling in that role now for Sonoma and Marin County. So really big shoes to fill, and I will do my very best. We have different backgrounds, so I think there are different things that I'll bring to the position as well, but I'm super excited to be here. I've been here since I think January 10th or something like that. So I'm pretty new to the area. But I have been with UC Cooperative Extension for the last 10 years, working in San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties. So for those of you who aren't familiar with UC Cooperative Extension, we are part of the University of California, and we really kind of harness the power of practical university research and bring it into the counties that we work in with the agriculture and natural resources communities in the local counties. And the research we do is really based on what are the needs of that community. So making sure that the research is very practical and addressing specific local needs. So my job is to do research and education related to livestock, range management, natural resources management. I view my clientele, I kind of think of myself as having two different groups of clientele. One is the ranchers. So in San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz, it was mostly beef cattle producers. I know up here we've got more sheep and goat producers. So I'm excited to kind of expand the group of ranchers that I'm working with up here. So that's kind of one group, and the other group I consider as being my clientele is agencies or nonprofits that are doing land management work or own land, and they're using livestock to help manage their lands. So those are the two groups I primarily envision myself working with. And like Roxanne said, I will be doing a needs assessment. So I'm hoping that maybe I can reach out to many of you to get some feedback on what are the biggest issues and needs and concerns in Sonoma and Marin counties to help me really focus and direct what I will be doing for my research and education programs. So I haven't started any research projects up here yet. I'm just super new, and I want to make sure I know what you all need before I get started. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit about some of the research that I was doing down in San Benito County that I think relates a bit to some of the conversation we've been having today already. But yeah, just to give a little bit of again, background of what I've spent the last 10 years doing as a cooperative extension advisor down on the Central Coast. I've done some work on weed management, looking at tumbleweed or Russian thistle, doing a research project looking at how to control that weed. I received a couple of substantial grants from CAL FIRE to create the Central Coast Prescribed Burn Association. I do not have a background in fire. My background is in range management, but I saw the need in the community down there to have more access to being able to do prescribed fire on rangelands and other lands, and to get training on how to do that safely and effectively. And so I was able to hire a lot of people who are fire experts to help really make that happen. So that was a really big part of my last several years. And I also got some funding from the California Cattle Council to do some research on trying to look at the influence of what is the influence of cattle grazing on wildfire behavior, specifically on flame length. And so we have a publication, I think it was published last year, 2024, maybe the end of 2023, in California Agriculture, talking about exactly that. We did a lot of modeling, trying to understand how many cattle are there across the state, and what is that influence on wildfire behavior. And our research did show that, in fact, there is a value and a benefit to livestock grazing on the ground to reduce flame length and make firefighting more safe thing to do. And I know that other people have been working on some on the ground research to kind of ground truth that modeling work that we did. And I think Roxanne has been part of that project as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Share screen. Share. Okay. Can you guys see the PowerPoint here?
It's showing kind of the back end of it. You might want to switch the screen that you're sharing.
Okay, so it's not showing the full. Okay.
It's not the full one. It's the one with the notes.
That's weird. How about now?
Now it's your email.
Oh my gosh, it's so confusing. Okay, I'm gonna bring this back over. Sorry.
If you unshare it, you could try sharing it again.
Okay.
And then select either that specific screen, or you can select that specific presentation.
Okay.
And if you have it already, like you could launch it. So stop sharing and then launch your presentation and then select it maybe.
Okay, here, let me see. Sorry, I thought I was more tech savvy than this. Okay, how about that?
Ah, still doing the same thing.
What? Okay,
Yep.
I'm gonna close it. And let me just actually close the file itself. I'm gonna close everything. Oh my gosh, you guys.
Worst case scenario, you can just expand that one screen to fill if it's not working to share.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring it over here, open it. Oops. Okay, I'm clicking that PowerPoint presentation. And again, it's probably showing the same thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so what is it that you're seeing?
It's what it would be like when I typically have my two screens. One screen is just the full expanded slide, and the other one is kind of the presenter's view. And we're seeing the presenter's view where it's like the current slide, your notes, and the upcoming slide. So I'm seeing that side.
How about that?
Better, for sure. Yep. Now it looks like a presentation.
Okay, let's go with that then.
There you go.
Okay, sorry for my lack of sharing abilities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that I was working on at Pinnacles National Park, which is in San Benito County, and it's basically targeted grazing for prairie restoration at Pinnacles National Park. And it wasn't just grazing that they were using, but that was a big component, and that's what I'm going to focus on talking about today, since this has been a really program focused on targeted grazing. This is sort of the research aspect of targeted grazing. So you can see Santa Cruz circled on the map, Hollister and Pacific Grove, just to kind of give you a sense of geography and where Pinnacles National Park is. And then the big red arrow on the right of the screen is pointing to Pinnacles National Park, which is a little bit southeast of Hollister on Highway 25. So that's where this project that I'm going to be talking about took place and is sort of still ongoing. So the goals of Pinnacles National Park were, for this prairie restoration project, was to reduce summer mustard, which is an invasive weed, increase native wildflowers, and reduce thatch and increase bare ground, specifically to improve wildlife habitat. And some of the main species of wildlife that they are interested in are California tiger salamanders, grassland birds, burrowing owls, San Joaquin coachwhip, and pollinators. And while fuels reduction is not the primary purpose of this project, they absolutely recognize that it's a co-benefit of doing grazing for these ecological purposes. So, and being myself being a neighbor to Pinnacles National Park, I was very happy to have the grazing implemented on this on the bottomlands here. Just it made me feel more safe knowing my neighbors were grazing down all that fuel. So at Pinnacles National Park, the treatments that we decided to implement for this experiment, this sort of prairie restoration experiment, to achieve their particular goals, we used cattle grazing, and we had kind of two different grazing treatments. We had season long, which was, there were two grazing periods. There was kind of December, January, and then the cattle were taken off and put on a different property and then came back kind of April, May through about July. So that was kind of the full season long. And then the other grazing treatment we did was the late season grazing only. We also seeded with native wildflowers in 2021, and they mowed each year in the winter time. So those are the different treatments that we used to try to achieve some of their goals. And so in terms of finding a rancher to do the grazing for this experiment, Pinnacles did a request for quotation process where they invited ranchers to come out to do a site tour and then put together the paperwork for a request for quotation and submit their proposals. And then the park went through and chose which grazing contractor they felt would do the best job to achieve what they were looking for. And so they contracted with a rancher for 3 years plus up to 2 option years. So right now they're in year 4 of having cattle out there. In terms of the infrastructure that's out there when the project started, so this was a 75-acre field that we were looking at for this research project. And there was existing boundary fencing along 2 sides of the 75-acre field. There was one existing water trough in there, and there was an existing corral from many years ago when there had been ranching out there previously that the rancher was able to use when needed, when they were bringing the cattle or rounding them up and taking them back. So in order to fence out the rest of the field, so I actually got a grant from the National Park Service to help implement this project. And part of the funding I got from the park was for infrastructure. So we used some of those grant funds to buy electric fence. And we also, toward the end of the grant, we bought some temporary equipment for temporary water, because that one, even though it's 75 acres, it's not that huge of a field. Having one water trough, we kind of saw that the cattle were focusing in maybe certain areas and wanting to increase, kind of be able to encourage them to move around more. And we think we can do that with water. So they're going to try that this year. So anyway, so for the remaining 2 sides, we did electric fencing to fence in that field. In terms of seeding, the species, the native wildflowers that we seeded were California poppies, goldfields, owl's clover, and tarweed. And this plot that you can see in front of you with all those vibrant yellow wildflowers are the goldfields that we had seeded. So this was, I think, the second spring after we had seeded, and they, in some of the plots, were doing really well, and we started seeing there were these like squares across the 75-acre field where you saw these like yellow flowers popping up, so it was really fun to see. In terms of methods, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the methods, but we did a lot of different, we measured a lot of different things for this project. We did photo points, line point intercept to get at percent cover of different species that are out there. We did vegetation structure, herbaceous biomass, and we also did ground squirrel counts and some other stuff for this project. So just to give a sense of all of the different aspects that we were looking at. So here is a picture of the bottomlands, which is the area, our research area, and that red outline is the 75-acre project area in the bottomlands. And you can see from north to south on the map, there's these little rectangles, and there's 10 of them, and that represents our plots across the field. So each one of these 1 through 10, we call them blocks, and each of those blocks has a fully grazed, late season grazing, and an ungrazed section. And within that, we have a control and we have a seeding for the different grazed plots. And then in the ungrazed plots, in addition to that, we also have a mowing and a mowing plus seeding treatment. And because mowing kind of in some ways replicates grazing, we did not add the mowing treatment to the grazed fields because that was felt unnecessary, and we didn't have the time to collect data for all of those additional fields. So this is just a sense of the plot layout. And then sort of in the middle right of this image, you can see a green blob. That is the outline of Pinnacles National Park with that small red section in the kind of northeast area is our project area. So in terms of the results, we did some very preliminary analysis of the 3 years with the treatments in place, and preliminary data are showing that there is a significant impact of grazing on summer mustard, and the plots that we seeded are having higher cover of native forbs. So that's encouraging. So in this picture here, you can see all that kind of leafy green plants. That's all the young summer mustard plants coming up. And actually, so that's what the summer mustard looks like in the springtime. And then I'm going to go back here to this picture. In this picture, you can see the 2 cattle there, and they're standing in a mass, and that is what the summer mustard looks like at the end of the season, you know, after the summer and into the fall and winter when it has dried up and died, that's what it looks like. So it looks very different at different times of year, but this is the plant that they're really trying to control. So in terms of next steps for this project, we're going to do a much deeper dive into the data and do a lot more data analysis, and then we'll draft a paper which we'll submit for publication. So even though I'm not in San Benito County anymore, I think the work that we were doing on that project is probably relevant enough to the folks up here to continue and try to get this work published so it can be available for people across the state and you know, much more widely than that. Be available for people to see what we did, how it worked, and to see if it's something that might work for them on their public or private lands. The rancher and Pinnacles are looking for funding to continue the grazing experiment. And if they do get that funding, they will, instead of what we had was that one 75-acre field, they will try to break that into smaller fields and do a little bit more intensive grazing to see if there's a difference between that and having just the one field in terms of how they're able to control, the cattle are able to control the mustard. And that is what I have for my targeted grazing project, and my phone number, my mobile number, my email address are listed on the slide. So please, please, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm new, I'm in the meeting people phase, so I want to meet as many people as I can. So if you're based out of Sonoma and Marin counties, please do reach out to me. I look forward to talking with you. So I'm gonna stop share and then see what I can do about, did I already stop my share? Let's see.
You're still sharing. We're seeing the slides that you had previously,
Okay.
like the slide deck.
Yep, I'm just gonna close that. And then sharing has stopped. Okay, do I have time for the NRCS presentation?
Yeah, I'd say if we want to take it, you know, maybe 8 more minutes, that'll bring us to one. The final words and questions component was my buffer room, and I think we're doing great. It's been so nice to hear about how your experience implementing a grazing plan worked out, you know, those steps that you went through, and certainly a lot of overlapping needs. It sounds like that intensive grazing versus traditional grazing component. I know Byron in the last panel was talking about a need for more research, so certainly something there. And I'm certainly interested in the seeding and grazing results that you'll be publishing. So yeah, if you want to jump into the NRCS component with the last few minutes, and then we'll open up questions for you and Sarah, and then more broadly to the other speakers.
Okay, sounds good. So what are you seeing now? Same thing.
It's great. It's the presentation. So
okay,
similar
so
format.
Okay, sounds good. So now we're gonna stop there. So what I was just talking about was my work and who I work for. Now I am going to be talking about NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I do not work for NRCS. I am not connected with NRCS in any way other than we are often partners or collaborators on projects. We were hoping to have someone from NRCS here today to speak to you guys directly, but they weren't able to do that. So they put together a PowerPoint presentation for me to share. So if you have questions about this, I may or may not, most likely I won't be able to answer your questions, but I wanted to share some information with you all about the Natural Resources Conservation Service because they are a resource for landowners and livestock producers. So this is a presentation put together by NRCS that I will do my best to go through. I think there's 4 slides. So they work with private farmers and ranchers and landowners across the county to help conserve natural resources. They provide technical assistance, and what that means is one-on-one personalized advice. They work only with producers and communities who want to work with them, so it's totally voluntary to find the best solutions to meet their unique conservation and business goals. If a producer chooses to take the next step toward improving their operations, NRCS can work with them to develop a conservation plan. And I think that can also, I believe, include a grazing plan with suggested conservation practices that can help them reach their conservation goals. In addition to technical assistance, NRCS can provide financial assistance, and it's a cost share reimbursable kind of financial assistance. And producers can also choose to apply for financial assistance to get help installing the conservation practices outlined in their conservation plan that's developed in collaboration with NRCS and the rancher. The kinds of financial assistance programs that NRCS has are the EQIP program, which is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. They have the Conservation Stewardship Program, the CSP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and it looks like in 2024, 95 projects were funded across these programs for Sonoma and Marin counties, and it was over $8 million in funded projects. So they do have quite a bit of funding for cost share for conservation on rangelands. Signups are continuous, but most application deadlines for 2025 have passed. So if you're interested, definitely reach out to NRCS. If you can't find their contact information, you can reach out to me and I can get you connected with them. These are some of the common practices that NRCS can help fund. Let's see, so on the vegetation side, brush management is one of them, weed control is one of them, and then on the animal related side, livestock pipeline, water facilities, prescribed grazing, and fence. And so a lot of the ranchers I talk to will work with NRCS to develop water, to put in pipelines, to put in water tanks, to put in water troughs, and that fencing. And my understanding is that they do not do boundary fencing, but they will do internal cross fencing. So if you need that cross fencing, this NRCS can be a really great way to try to get some money for that as well. Oh, good. So this presentation was put together by Chase Garcia. He's the district conservationist at the Petaluma NRCS office, and his contact information is here. So if you have any questions about NRCS and the kinds of technical and financial assistance they can provide, please reach out to Chase. And that is the last slide there. So let me stop share. Okay. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Davey. And thank you for covering the NRCS portion. I really appreciate you sharing those slides and reaching out to Chase. I know NRCS is very supportive and under some distinct challenges right now. So we appreciate all we can get. But yeah, so this is our time to kind of open up the field for questions. If there are specific questions for Davey and Sarah regarding some of those, opportunities for support, collaborative grazing, NRCS, research through cooperative extension, we can address those first. And then I know there's still, we've still got Chase on here, and if we want to answer any additional questions that might come up for the larger group as a whole. I think there's a lot of knowledgeable people in this group, so welcome.
I have a burning question regarding funding. So I checked with my CAL FIRE grant manager, and of course they don't do fencing. And like you said, Sarah, like fencing's long-term, you don't have to invest any more beyond that. But I was just wondering earlier today, what about virtual fencing? That's a little less it's cheaper, and that might not be so infrastructure or whatever's making the bulk against funding infrastructure. Do you guys, any of you have any experience? No, it won't work for sheep and goats, but
no, they won't fund any.
Fence?
They currently will not fund any of those things. So it's not even the cost, it's the concept. Just like NRCS won't do perimeter fencing because I believe it's viewed as like supporting a producer in their revenue or something like that, rather than where internal fencing and NRCS will fund because you're improving your grazing methodology, you're improving your conservation stuff. So they're willing to fund conservation projects. CAL FIRE is willing to fund fire resiliency or vegetation management, but none of them have seen the tool of infrastructure being a benefit for the maintenance of that. And that's the push, is like CAL FIRE won't now. We've had one funder do it, and we're going to hopefully demonstrate this success and that we're being strategic about where those fire breaks are, and that we're supporting the whole county with really strategic fire breaks because of the infrastructure and the grazing going on in perpetuity. So it's a big ask. It's a big shift for funders because most funders want to fund an application, then they can check it. You did it. It's over. I funded it, it's complete. But what they're getting feedback is the maintenance, like if we're looking at this. So the feedback's there, it's just the shift may take 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But if we keep getting fires and we continue to demonstrate that these systems work, that's how we start to show them. So through storytelling and showing projects that work.
Well, the interesting part about my grant is they specifically wanted us to do grazing.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll fund a single application of grazing, but they won't fund a system that makes that grazing go on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
It's that's why I said training the funders. Like we have to start helping them understand that funding single applications are not really economically sustainable because it's going to go on forever.
Right. And they know that.
And Tony, I'm sure you know that Morgan Doran, Davey's counterpart in YOLO, he's been doing a lot more of research on the virtual fencing and would be a good resource if there's alternative sources of funding, even if it's not covered by your grant.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not CAL FIRE, but maybe some other, even agricultural grants, Western SARE grants.
Yeah.
Start thinking about all the different funneling of funds in that somebody might want to fund a research or that as a tool.
Thank you.
There had been a question in the chat from Lynn asking if, oh, she's leaving now.
The match.graze one, we covered that one. I think we're good.
Just making sure.
Yeah. Any last burning questions? A lot of useful information, hopefully. It's all sinking in. Right.
I still feel like the people are the hardest to deal with, even though goats can be really naughty and sheep can be really dopey. It's still the people that are the most challenging part.
Yeah. I agree. And that's why so much of my work is people oriented, because if we don't start moving and connecting the people, we can't build out any really sustainable projects.
Yeah.
So engaging the people on what is of their concern and bringing it to, and listening to them and hearing what they want, you can address it with this. You just start the conversation with their concerns.
Yeah.
This is what I try to do. And it doesn't always work.
Well, thank you all for participating. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you everybody for spending your Saturday morning talking about grazing. And, it's important. It's a great tool. Really appreciate being here. And thank you, Patty, Sonoma RCD, for putting this together. I know Patty's going to be providing this as a recorded presentation. And if there was anything else you wanted to share, Patty.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you as well. And if you're interested in the resources that we have here at the RCD, you all have my contact information in the email that I sent you with the link for today. And please be sure to reach out and I'll get you connected with the right people. Thank you, Roxanne. And all the presenters. This has just been great. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are awesome.
And